Prince's ex-wife, Mayte Garcia, is opening up about her tragic love story with the iconic singer.
"There's my future wife," Prince said when he saw Mayte Garcia standing outside his concert venue in 1989. Mayte Garcia was just a teen when she met the 32-year-old music genius. They married 6 years later. For the first time, she talks about life with Prince and how the death of their baby drove them apart. This is all the lies and evil truth behind her marriage with Prince, exclusively and directly shared by Mayte, the singer's first wife and erstwhile inspiration. It was Christmas, and Prince was lonely. After a decade of restlessly creative music, epic films, and staggering live shows, His Purple Highness was one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. He hadn't made a bona fide classic album for a while, but at 34, he could still dance like James Brown, play guitar like Jimi Hendrix, and sing like no one else ever. At Paisley Park, his vast recording complex and living quarters outside Minneapolis, Prince was the sun around which orbited a rolling 24/7 enterprise supporting musicians, dancers, technicians, designers, hairdressers, and household staff. He had recently signed what was thought to be the most lucrative record contract in history. He had friends, devoted fans, and a conveyor belt of women throwing themselves at him, drawn to the bacchanalian reputation of the man behind some of the most filthy songs ever written. Yet as 1992 drew to a close, here he was, holed up in Miami, an exotic winter exile from his frozen home state of Minnesota, pining for his latest muse, a teenage backing dancer who was spending the festive season at her grandmother's house in Puerto Rico. Mayte Garcia was still a teen when she first laid eyes on Prince. In The Most Beautiful, her intimate new memoir of their life together, she writes that after witnessing him perform live in Barcelona in the summer of 1990, my world was never the same again. At that point, she had been so busy with school and her sideline career as a professional belly dancer that she had never had a boyfriend of any sort. 2.5 years later, despite performing in one of the raunchiest stage shows around, she still hadn't. Of course, Garcia didn't believe Prince when he told her that he was flying in first class from Florida. Then suddenly, there he was, arriving at Grandma Mercedes's cramped house in a poor neighborhood of San Juan, where the washing hung in the backyard and the family ate at a table on the porch. The visit was, she says now, surreal. They pulled up in the limo, and Garcia was laughing hysterically. The rock star had dressed as he always did for low-key occasions, fabulously. There was no toning down, says Garcia. Prince was probably sporting a lace shirt for the house call. He was definitely wearing makeup and women's perfume because he always did. She remembers clearly how his high heels echoed on the tiled floor where she had danced to his 80s hits as a little girl. Her father took him up onto the roof to admire the illegal second-floor apartment he had built there. Prince spoke not a word of Spanish but chatted with her family in a very respectful way. Grandma Mercedes, who had little English, knew exactly who the visitor was and proclaimed him so nice. Later that night, Garcia went to Prince's hotel room and found him sitting on top of a piano staring out over the ocean. "I'm going to change my name," he told her. "To what?" He pointed to the unpronounceable symbol on the cover of the album they had been working on. "To that." "I bet you're the only one who won't try to talk me out of it," he told her. Garcia rolls her eyes indulgently at the memory. "I thought, oh, he's just going through a phase." Within weeks, she would become Prince's lover, and not long after that, he would be the artist formerly known as Prince, a clumsy nickname he never chose or liked, she says. Later, she would become his first wife and the mother of his son, but he made no attempt to seduce her that night in Puerto Rico. He really did just drop in to say hi. "I think he liked meeting people who connected to people that he cared about," she says. "It was his way of trying to be normal." He was famously protective of his privacy and cultivated a deliberate mystique about his life, but at the same time, he refused to be imprisoned by his fame. I don't think he felt trapped. I think he had created his world, and if he wanted to reach out, he would. When Garcia learned of Prince's death on April 21st, she hadn't seen him for years. She was sitting in her car beside a freeway in her adopted city of Los Angeles after picking up a text from the singer's second ex-wife, Manuela Testolini, telling her to call. Garcia recalls screaming, "No!" repeatedly after she heard the news of his fatal accidental overdose of the painkiller fentanyl. For a while, everything spun around her. Then the two women, bitter rivals turned mourners, wept down the phone to each other. Once she made it back home, reporters and photographers arrived and camped outside her door for days, while television networks besieged her by phone for a comment. "But I had no comment," she writes. "Nothing I could say about this man could be squeezed into a 3-minute morning show segment." So she bided her time, nailed down the publishing deal for the memoir she had long planned to write, and prepared to tell the world about the Prince Rogers Nelson that she knew. This man only loosely resembles the Prince of popular imagination. Yes, he was controlling, obsessed with music, and prone to stealing her mascara and getting his wardrobe assistants to restructure her clothes to fit him. But he was also a keen port drinker, a sports fan, a quick-witted prankster with a mouth like a truck driver, a considerate, unkinky lover, and a hopeless romantic who conscientiously read What to Expect When You're Expecting. When Garcia was pregnant, when sharing about her past with Prince, she spoke in a soft, sing-song voice punctuated by frequent bouts of giggles, but there is tragedy running through her story. Covering her left wrist is a huge tattoo of Prince's symbol, interwoven with the first letter of her name, a logo that he wore on the back of his white wedding suit and had monogrammed all over their home, on the china, the curtains, napkins, and towels, before he burned everything that reminded him of her after their marriage failed, including the ashes of their son, Amir, who died in infancy. She had the tattoo done 2 weeks after Prince died. My mom was like, "You should have gone bigger." Garcia's mother, who comes across as a whirlwind of ambition and energy in the book, lives downstairs from her. She's married to Garcia's father again for the 3rd time, in the latest twist in a chaotic relationship. But apparently, they can't stand each other. Home life revolves around Gia, Garcia's 5-year-old adopted daughter, and their animals: a guinea pig, 2 cats, 7 birds, and 7 dogs. "I could charge you $5 for a petting zoo," she deadpans. There's a blown-up picture on the living room wall of her with Prince and a clutch of awards in her office, she says, but otherwise little sign of the life she once led. 2 things stand out about how Garcia talks about Prince. For starters, it's often in the present tense, even though he has been dead almost a year. She cries at night still, weeping partly for her lost soulmate and partly for the 2 children he gave her who did not survive. The other thing the reporter notices is that she barely refers to him by name at all. She avoided doing it even as his wife or when dancing in dozens of music videos, on 5 world tours, and a couple of 100 after-shows. Right from their first meeting, she understood on some level that, if I would have called him Prince, I would have started screaming and jumping up and down, so I separated the rock star from the man in the hotel room. She never called him anything. Garcia was born on a military base in Alabama. Her father was a pilot. Her mother was a dance teacher. Garcia began dancing at 3 and was belly dancing for money at 7, going on to earn a mild dose of fame by dancing with a sword on her head for the same primetime talent show that introduced a 5-year-old Tiger Woods to the world. Around the same time, she was abused by a family friend, who later attacked her older sister, Jan. I think that's one of the reasons why I stayed a virgin and didn't date. Her parents divorced, and her father moved to a new base in Germany. When her mother realized that she had made a mistake, the family flew out to join him. Garcia's sideline career took off there, and by the time she was 16, she had saved $100,000. Belly dancing continued to dominate her free time when she wasn't in class. Coincidentally attending the same American high school in Wiesbaden, where the future Priscilla Presley studied between meeting Elvis and marrying him. It was her sister who was a real Prince fan and who persuaded the family to drive across Europe to see him perform in Barcelona in July 1990. But when Garcia saw Prince on stage, everything changed. The power of his performance was like a marathon jumping into a tornado swallowed by wild horses, she writes. It wasn't a crush. I just remember thinking, I need to meet him, and I need to dance for him. On the way back to Germany, her mother hatched a plan to persuade Prince to recruit the 16-year-old Garcia to dance in his videos. She discovered that the nude tour would be in Mannheim in August, and forced her daughter to shoot a video, which they then handed to a dancer to take backstage before the gig. Sometime later, a bodyguard appeared and said that Prince wanted to meet her. She was very sure about how good a dancer she was and felt completely composed as she went to meet Prince. At 5 feet 2 inches, he was 2 inches shorter than her but was wearing heels, so they were eye to eye. He told her that he liked her tape and asked, "Are you really 16 years old?" I was proud about it, she says. She believes that there is nothing sinister about his interest in her. She had been around slimy people dancing in Cairo, and this was different. Prince invited her to his presidential suite in a Frankfurt hotel that night, but once her chaperoning mother and sister had left, they ate popcorn and watched more tapes of her dancing. So began a bizarre long-distance friendship in which one of the most famously sex-fixated men in the world spoke on the phone most days with a schoolgirl belly dancer. He also sent her tapes of work in progress and the occasional set of first-class plane tickets and VIP concert passes. After Christmas that first year, he flew her to Chanhassen, the snowbound Minnesota town where Paisley Park and his electric blue and rosehip pink home were located. His bedroom was like all the hotel rooms she had visited him in. Lava lamps, candles, beads, thick rugs, and cushions everywhere, and boasted a bathroom stocked with female perfumes and oil of Olay, plus a walk-in wardrobe sorted by color: black, brown, red, purple, indigo, and blue. They went on long drives together, hung out with his 2 doves, and went to see The Godfather Part 3 at the cinema. Garcia, in turn, sent him videos of her dancing, but also of her life at school. He laughed at footage of her forging an absence slip for a friend and found her brief prom date with a Hawaiian-American footballer named Papu hilarious. She had to leave for a dance engagement after 30 minutes. Papu had no idea that she even knew Prince. After she left high school, she had intended to go back to Egypt and pursue a lucrative belly dancing career. Instead, she ended up on the road in 1992 as the newest dancer on Prince's Diamonds and Pearls tour. Her pay, about which Prince seemed oblivious, was a fraction of what she had been earning in Europe, and there were tensions within the group over her arrival. One night, Garcia said in tears bursting down her puffy cheeks that she overheard members of the band laughing about how she still had to stuff her bra. She told Prince, who burst out laughing. "Stop crying," he told her. "They know their time is limited. I've moved on." Not long after that, he sent her a note telling her that one of the main reasons he loved and worshipped her was because you don't have a history. "I can't begin to tell you how many women are jealous of you because they know you're a virgin." By the time Prince came to visit her in Puerto Rico that Christmas, his power in the record industry was unmatched. Always admired for his versatility, he played bass, drums, piano, and about 20 other instruments in addition to guitar, and he was his own songwriter, producer, and arranger. He could now claim to be a formidable businessman, too, having secured a $100 million record deal earlier that year. Whether his representatives were exaggerating or not was beside the point. Their figure dominated headlines and soothed Prince's competitive ego. It dwarfed anything signed by his contemporaries Madonna and Michael Jackson, or indeed anyone in the history of music. Privately, though, he was chafing against what he felt were limits on his freedom as an artist. After he abandoned the Prince name, He began to scrawl the word slave on his face to dramatize his fight to escape the golden confines of his recording contract. Garcia had a different breakthrough on her mind. She had desired more than Prince's friendship. Gradually, their relationship had evolved, and he had signaled his intentions by awarding her a personal bodyguard. But even though they now spent the night together sometimes, it was never below the belt. Ever. She arranges her features into a caricature of affronted frustration. Then, during a video shoot, he told her that it was time. A week later, she wrote in her diary, February 9th, 1993, not a virgin, with a winking, smiley face in the margin. In her book, Garcia is discreet about sex, but people are curious about what it was like to go to bed with the man who sang about 23 positions in a one-night stand. Very, very tender, she says after a pause. I can't say for all the other women. For me, it was always very tender, attentive, and sweet. Even though I danced on stage with handcuffs, there was never any of that. He did not sing to her in bed, although he did play his song, Let's Have a Baby, when they were trying to conceive. He wore eyeliner and women's cologne. But it worked. He was very masculine. Prince, Garcia said, had two personalities. On one side, there was the insatiable sex thing. She never saw that Prince. I saw the boyfriend, nothing crazy, loving, respectful. She did not envy the women who catered to his other side. I was held high on this pedestal, and I liked it. The life they had together sometimes felt normal. Prince loved to impersonate people and prank call local shops or guests at Paisley Park. They would go to the supermarket in the middle of the night and could eat in local restaurants if they had a private room, though mostly they ordered takeaways. Once they became vegans, they found a pair of green-fingered housewives who grew them more vegetables than they knew what to do with. Prince loved sports, particularly basketball, despite his height, and boxing. He had been in fights at school during a difficult upbringing and liked to wrestle with Garcia. They spent much of their time closed off from the world in Paisley Park, a place that could feel like an out-of-town business park, but with its soundstage, studios, editing facilities, basketball court, hair salon, and a constant murmur of doves. They would stay up till the early hours and sleep during the day. A trip to the shops with Prince was always like an episode of Supermarket Sweep, trying to grab anything that appealed before the other customers noticed him. Garcia learned early on that nobody challenged Prince. I would see other people do it, and then they would get cast out. Okay, note to myself, don't do that. Don't talk to him this way, because you're going to get that. He once wrote her a letter explaining, when I have a disagreement with someone, it's usually only one. Then they're gone. Whereas he didn't mind fighting with her because he knew they would always be together. In practice, though, she never stood up to her husband until the very end of their marriage. It's one of the reasons she enjoyed being hypnotized by him. It was the only time he would let her talk without interrupting. They married in 1996 at a church in Minneapolis. The groom, who wore white bell-bottoms and a monogrammed bolero jacket, had held a casting call for Flower Girls, redecorated Paisley Park as a surprise for his new bride, and filled it with $500,000 worth of floral displays. Above the elevator, where he would be found dead 20 years later, he had the message, "Elevate," inscribed. The next day, they flew to Hawaii for their honeymoon. It was only when she saw a billboard through the back window of the limousine to the hotel that she realized it would be a working holiday, with 3 concerts. She became pregnant immediately, and the months leading up to the birth of their child were amazing, the most approachable that she ever saw Prince. Due to his unusual life, he'd never been around pregnant people, but he learned everything he could about the process and even did a Muppet sketch to amuse her. She laughed at the sight of him wearing hospital scrubs in the delivery room on the day of her cesarean. As soon as the conversation turns to what happened next, Garcia starts to blink and is close to tears. She says she was very, very picky about her ghostwriter and deliberately selected one who had lost a child. She had multiple emotional breakdowns recording the audiobook. "It's really hard," she says. "I'd have a 21-year-old right now. It's that wound that will always be there." When Amir was delivered, Prince's face registered a joy she had never witnessed before, and then within seconds it turned to pure terror. Their son was born with Pfeiffer syndrome type 2, a genetic condition causing skeletal and systemic abnormalities. Amir had hands and feet that looked webbed, no eyelids, and no anus. He lived for only one agonizing week. The passages of the book that describe those days and the grieving that followed, culminating in Garcia's attempt to end her life, are desperately sad to read. "He's in surgery again," Prince told Garcia later. They'd sewn his eyes shut. Intubation, ventilation, feeding tube, colostomy, exploratory something. It was impossible to take it all in. 2 days later, Garcia's husband briefly went home to take a shower. While he was gone, she had someone wheel her down to see her son. His skin was incredibly soft. The joints of his fingers were fused, so he couldn't grab his mom's finger, but he found a way to fold his little hand around the side of Garcia, hanging on for dear life. Her husband came. She worried that he'd be angry, but he wasn't. He sat on the floor with his body against his dearing wife's knee, humming and whispering to Amir, and they stayed that way for hours. There were more surgeries. He didn't want our son to be alone through any of it. Every day something new went wrong or collapsed or presented itself. Some new problem was discovered. Some existing problem got worse. We spent all the hours we could in our little family corner, humming and telling stories, and taking in the softness of his skin and hair, the soft smell of his warm little body, the beauty of his spirit. After 6 days, he was struggling to breathe, and I said to the doctor, "He's not leaving here, is he?" He avoided answering my question. Instead, he talked about more invasive measures, including a tracheotomy. He quietly explained to me that if we didn't allow him to insert this permanent pipe in Amir's throat, we were making the choice to let him go. And the more he talked on and on in this cold way, the more hysterical I got. "You're torturing him! He can't live like this!" Garcia sobbed. Her husband pulled her into the next room and tried to calm her down. "If they do this, if they can get him breathing with the machine, then what? What else?" They stood there in the empty room, coming to the same terrible place. Holding each other tight, they agreed. "If they take him off the machine and he can breathe, we keep fighting. If he can't live without the machine, maybe he's not supposed to be here." They decided to went back in and spoke with the doctors. The doctors tried to reassure and comfort us, tried to tell us this was the right thing to do, but the rightness of it didn't make it any less bitter. The couple signed papers and agreed on a time when life support would be removed the next day. Then they sent Prince and Garcia home with painkillers and Valium, and the hurt mother crawled into a dark sleep. When Garcia woke up again, she heard a phone ringing. A moment later, her husband came and said, "It's done. They took the tubes out." "What? No, I'm supposed to be there," she cried and screamed. "I didn't know if you could handle it." The phone rang again. Prince answered it, and then he hung up and said, "He's gone." They spent most of the next day huddled together, crying. Later, Garcia lay in bed with Amir's ashes. Sometimes she was aware of her husband lying next to or sitting in a chair. The next day, or maybe it was a few days or a week later, Prince came to her and said, "I can't be here. I have to go." Although Prince did everything he could to support his wife through the crisis, she now thinks his own sadness left him so lost that he became vulnerable to recruitment into the Jehovah's Witnesses by his friend Larry Graham, the former bass player for Sly and the Family Stone. Garcia felt like I failed us. She was so besotted with her husband that, if he had asked me to drive off a cliff with him, I would have done it. But she did not begin to come to terms with Amir's death until many years later, when a psychiatrist on the reality television told her, "You're a mom who lost her child." When the couple then lost a second child to a miscarriage, Prince was much less sympathetic. Garcia still believed she could save the marriage and that they might adopt instead, but she says Prince's new faith had begun to change him. He believed their struggles were a punishment sent by God, he told her. She had temporarily moved to Spain to buy a hacienda for them to live in, but he rarely visited. He told a press conference their marriage had been annulled when it hadn't, and he was spending more and more time with Manuela Testolini, who had joined his Bible study group. Eventually, the Witness crew succeeded with a steady campaign to separate and alienate me, says Garcia. Prince and Garcia officially divorced in 2000. I don't know how I got past all that, she says now, narrowing her eyes. Entering the marriage as an 18-year-old with significant assets, she left with almost nothing. Her mistake was assuming Prince would always be there for financial support if she needed it. Now realizing he's gone and won't be there is heartbreaking. She is particularly puzzled by the absence of a will, because when I was married to him, he had one. Since 2000, she has had other relationships, notably with Tommy Lee, Pamela Anderson's ex-husband and Mötley Crüe member, but none have replaced Prince, her first love and the father of her deceased son. His death was a complete shock to her, since he was very well guarded from the public and she was no longer in the circle. She didn't realize how reliant he had become on powerful opioids to manage the chronic pain from his demanding stage performances. During the decade she was with him, she never saw him use drugs. He always carried a black bag that she believed contained only sweets, vitamins, makeup, a Bible, and wads of cash. But, she recalls, there were a few disturbing incidents when he acted oddly. Several times he said he was sick or had a migraine. Looking back, she see it was something else. She said, I didn't realize it then, maybe because I didn't want to. But Mayte Garcia has found meaningful ways to honor her and Prince's only child, Amir. It's always painful, reflects Garcia, now 49, as she remembers their son's brief life. He would have been 27 this year, she adds. But being on the board for Pfeiffer syndrome brings me joy because I see that children are surviving it now. There's so much more research being done. When Amir passed, there was very little information available. So yes, it's painful, but it's fulfilling to know I'm helping others. Garcia, now the mother of 11-year-old Gia, whom she adopted in 2013, is relaunching the charity she and Prince started in 1996, originally named L4OA, for Love for Our Amir. The new iteration, Live for Love Charities, reflects Prince's message of love. I aim to honor what Prince stood for, which was always about love, Garcia explains. The foundation is working on a 10-10 project, which will allocate $10,000 each to 10 different foundations nominated by the public through the charity's website. Garcia describes the original mission of the charity as focusing on helping those in need. Back then, we didn't need to fundraise because Prince could donate directly, she says. Live for. Love will operate as a public 501c and will be raising funds for various charitable programs including music education for children. She recalls that Prince was always generous but preferred to keep his philanthropy private. He would quietly support numerous causes from teaching tech jobs to youth to helping Trayvon Martin's family, Garcia notes. After our divorce, he continued the L4OA Foundation, and although he was secretive about his charitable work, I knew about some of his contributions. Garcia, who also manages the Mayte Rescue Animal Foundation, admits that after Amir's death, she and Prince struggled to stay together in their shared grief, especially after she suffered a miscarriage 2 years later. The couple divorced in 2000, but remained on good terms until Prince's death. Garcia considered visiting him with her daughter when she heard he was unwell, but ultimately chose not to. I felt he needed someone, and I regret not going, she says. Yet I accept that it was his time. It's hard to be ready for someone to go, but I've come to a place where I can smile and think of him with love. Garcia believes that Prince's spirit remains around her. There was a deep soul connection. He was a very special person and will always hold a special place in my life. Thank you for watching this deep dive into Mayte Garcia's revelations about her marriage with Prince. It's clear from her story that there's much more to their relationship than what the public ever saw. From the heart-wrenching struggles to the hidden truths, Mayte has unveiled the layers of her time with one of music's greatest legends. What do you think about the truths and lies revealed in Mayte's story? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive content. Thank you for joining us today. See you in the next video.